I'm going to introduce Christine Brennan because across our crowded and loud journalism platforms, smart and distinctive voices are hard to come by. But for decades, and I don't mean to age Christine,
It's okay.
her work has stood out. As USA Today's national sports columnist and a commentator for CNN, ABC News, PBS NewsHour, and the list goes on, Christine's incisive analyses have transcended sport. She's been a powerful advocate for social justice, calling out the Washington football team early and often for its long offensive team name. She focused a critical eye on gender inequity with a series of columns that helped pave the way, as many of you probably know, to allow women entry into the iconic Augusta National Golf Club. And the list goes on, but I've seen personally, I've worked with Christine at USA Today at many Olympic Games, and I've seen personally how the powerful take flight when she's entered a briefing room or venues across the globe. So with that, I'll introduce you to Christine Brennan and come with your questions.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thanks. Thank you, Kevin. Yes. I think you had some fleeing as well because for all those Olympics, we were working side by side and asking the tough questions. You can love the Olympics, as I do, and get tears in your eyes at the opening ceremonies. And also, while you have tears in your eyes, like this is beautiful and wonderful, the world has come together, you can be writing a column just ripping the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, to shreds. That's journalism, right? We're not there to cheer. We're there to report. And as a sports journalist, I know you. Are any sports journalists in the crowd? Although even the yes.
Well,
Yeah.
I was much more interested in the Russian doping thing, so I was much more on the athletic side. So it would have been like Seb Coe's, what was then IAAF.
Sure.
And
I know. I've known Seb Coe since.
and then I went to Moscow to see Valentin Balaknechev before that was the end of Rusev. Yeah.
Excellent. Yes. Well, again, yes, I do cover sports as well, but I'm sure we've rubbed elbows as well at some point, or at least been within earshot of each other. Good to see you. And let's backtrack just to kind of give you a little bit of a sense of how I got to where I am now, and wherever that is, and also how all of you can get to exactly where you want to reach your dreams. I'm sure each and every one of you has a thought of like, when I'm 40, when I'm 50, when I'm 60, this is what I'd like. Or maybe that's a little unimaginable, but there's some sense of like, wouldn't that be great? Oh my gosh, to be doing whatever that dream is. And for me, I was growing up at a time when girls were not encouraged to love or play sports. It was before Title IX. Title IX was signed by Richard Nixon in June of '72. I started high school in September of '72. But thankfully, I had my own personal Title IX. I had my dad and my mom as well. And I've written a book, actually, Best Seat in the House. Not that you need to get it by any means, but it tells that story. It's the first, and I think only, sports memoir written, father-daughter sports memoir written by a woman. And so I'm very proud of that. It came out in '06, so it's still in many ways an evergreen book that way. And but so I didn't have any encouragement really to play sports except from my mom and dad. Most girls, this would be your parents or maybe your grandparents, were being told, no, you can't do this. You go play with dolls, go do Barbies, go do whatever. You cannot play with the boys. And my mom and dad were saying, yeah, sure, go. How lucky was I? And that is very much beginning of the path where I'm sitting in front of you right now. I'm 5'11" and a half, so I was tall. Could beat and they were okay with me playing with them. They'd pick me first often in baseball or whatever. There was no organized soccer back then. There's no girls or boys, little 5-year-old orange-sliced soccer. No, there's nothing like that. It was just us playing in the field or in someone's front yard. This is the suburbs of Toledo, Ohio, and it was quite idyllic in many ways, even though for those girls that were told no, it wasn't idyllic at all. But Anyway, I played 6 sports in high school, not because I was so great, I was a 6-sport athlete, but because no one cared if girls specialized. And there were some college scholarships out there. I wanted to go to Northwestern very much for journalism, and so I did have the first meeting. Any Northwestern Wildcats in the room? Go Cats. Well, we can talk later, although I will explain in a few minutes why I'm going to be literally running out the door for a few minutes, unfortunately, in a little bit. But I was going to walk, I went to the first meeting of the women's basketball team. I thought, even if I make this team as a walk-on, I'll be sitting on the bench in Iowa City on a Saturday night, and I wanted to be going to some of the parties and doing some of the fun things on campus. So bottom line is I played intramurals and did all of that. But I had this incredible sports immersion, playing sports, watching sports on TV, no ESPN back then, so we'd have a game of the week. Kevin, you probably remember this, the Saturday baseball game of the week with Kurt Gowdy and Tony Kubek. And you couldn't wait for that, right? You just 1 o'clock, turn on that TV, 3 channels, and there it is. And there's no taping it, My brother and I sometimes, I have 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. So it wasn't older brothers, it was my dad. And teaching me how to throw the baseball correctly and all that. But sometimes we audio tape these games. We literally put mom and dad's tape recorder on it to just have the sound, have the audio. We were geeks. We were really into it. And we had season tickets for the Toledo Mud Hens, for the minor league team of the Detroit Tigers. We went up to Tigers games. We had season tickets for Michigan football, Ann Arbor's 45 minutes from Toledo. And we just I had the most fun sports childhood, and young adulthood. And then Northwestern, undergrad and master's from Medill. And I still thought I might be a political reporter because I never really read a woman's sports byline, a woman, covering sports. And I never really saw a woman on TV doing sports except Phyllis George, who'd been Miss America in 1971. And if you had to be Miss America to be doing sports on TV, well, if you look at pictures of me from back then, that was not going to be my career path. Anyway, bottom line is, and by the way, Phyllis George became a wonderful friend and mentor, and her daughter, Pamela Brown of CNN, I'm sure some of you know, every time I'm on with Pamela, we talk about her mom, who passed away a couple of years ago. So, but then I go to Northwestern, walk in the Daily, and I go to the sports section just to kind of see maybe that would be a place for me as a freshman, first year. And I ask if I could speak to the sports editor, and a woman comes over and says, "I'm the sports editor." And I thought, oh my gosh, this is possible. Her name, Helene Elliott. She is a columnist with the LA Times to this day, and one of the greats in the business. And every time I see her, I say, you showed me it was possible. As we're in Rio running to try to figure out, where the field hockey field is. And we laughed all these years later, and we're lost, wandering through a venue trying to get to field hockey at the Rio Olympics, the glamour of that. Anyway, so that's kind of the background. Miami Herald for 3 years. I was hired because I was a woman. If I had been a white male, I would have not gotten the job. I think it's very important to be honest about that. They had never had a female sports writer. So for the first and only time in my life, as a white suburban girl from Toledo, I was a minority. I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying I was. Because that was the state of affairs, that women were not being hired to be sports writers. And I'm now here so happy to tell you there are well over 1,000 women, probably 2,000 women covering sports in our country. If anyone has interest in sports, or of younger people in college, what have you, who are young women or men, the Association for Women in Sports Media is our organization. I was the first president back from 88 to 90, and I'm now the chair of the board, and we have tons of student chapters, and it's just a wonderful opportunity for women, and we're not exclusive, men, to be members, and the programming and the internships that we have. I fund 2 of those scholarship internships every year. Again, Association for Women in Sports Media, we call it AWESOME, AWSM. And so, all the opportunities now that we have for young women, but back then it was new. But I was so ready for this. I was probably like many of you, I was launched into the world of my dreams, and I just thought, there's no way if someone's standing at the locker room door not allowing me in to do my job, which did happen quite a bit in 81, 82, 83-ish, that's going to make me, not be a sports writer? Of course not. I'm just want this so badly. I said a few moments ago, I was thinking I'd be a political reporter because I didn't have any sense of that women could do this. There's no internet, so I'm not seeing that the New York Times has hired women. The Boston Globe, until like a Time magazine story said that, and then all of a sudden, oh, there are some women out there in addition to the sports editor of the Daily Northwestern. But that was, I thought politics, I love politics, love it to this day. It's my spectator sport. I go with a few sports writer friends up to the New Hampshire primary every 4 years. We'll be there, not to cover it, just to, it's the last great free thing. And they watch you in the room, right? You've covered a few of those, I think. And so just for a couple of days, just for fun. But who says that, right? Go to the New Hampshire primary for fun. Well, we do. So I love politics, and there's a very interesting parallel, right? Politics and sports, winner, loser, backroom deals, but also the playing field is right there in front of you. The conventions, the Super Bowl, the Olympic, men's or women's 100-meter dash, Katie Ledecky, Michael Phelps. It's all that's regularly scheduled. It's the time. It's 8 o'clock. That's going to happen then. If you're covering the crime beat for a newspaper, and I have many, many friends who did that over the years, the murder, very unfortunate and sad as it would be that there's a murder, is not scheduled for 8 o'clock. You're not witnessing it. You're coming afterwards. And in sports, it is there for you, and you're watching it as it happens, regularly scheduled. That's a very cool aspect of it all. You know exactly what's happening when the game, the surprises happen during the event, but it's still there in front of you. And so anyway, I've never become a political reporter, but I have morphed over the years, as Kevin was saying, into more of sports as culture. I covered the Washington football team so I came to the Washington Post after the Herald, after the LA Olympics, the first LA Olympics. I'm going to hopefully have bookends. 84 LA was my first, and 2028 LA, but I don't think that's going to be my last by any means. I had a great Zoom with some Northwestern friends last night, and everyone's talking about retiring. And I said, I'm never going to retire. This is retirement. I mean, I get to do exactly what I want to do, exactly when I want to. I've carved out my career that way, with contracts and with lots of free time and a lot of time on my own. Gets very busy at an Olympics, no sleep, what have you. But it also allows me to do all these kinds of things that are just, so fun and really control my own life. And I think that's something for you guys to think of moving forward with your careers. What is it going to look like when you're 50 years old? Who knows, right? We'll have holograms, in front of our faces or something. And maybe that's sooner than when you guys are 50. But what I've done, I was a total 100% print journalist, excuse me, Miami Herald, Washington Post for 12 years, 84 to 96, covering the football team when they won games and won Super Bowls, with Joe Gibbs, first woman to cover the Washington football team, that terrible name, and which I wrote many times because back then we weren't even thinking about it, 85, 6, 7. But that covered the Super Bowl, Doug Williams winning the Super Bowl. I still see Doug. We talk all the time. Joe Gibbs, the coach, did not want a woman covering his team, said he didn't want me in the locker room. The NFL commissioner, Pete Rozelle at the time, an amazing man, a great leader, got the NFL to where it is now. He said it's equal access. She will be in the locker room. Obviously, it's the Washington Post. The NFL's not going to mess around with the Washington Post. Let's be real. If I was from a smaller paper, it might have been easier for them to do that. And so Joe Gibbs said, fine, those are the rules. She's in the locker room. That's it. And for 3 years, I never, ever had a problem. I had access. He was great. Other coaches like Don Shula, the Miami Dolphins, came in when I was in Miami, tapped me on the elbow at one point. I'm kind of like, who's bugging me? I'm ready. I'm doing a very intense interview. I kind of swing around like to say, hey, what do you want? And it's the greatest coach, one of the greatest coaches of all time, Don Shula, the Hall of Famer, and now passed away a few years ago. And he said, I just want to make sure everything's okay in here. So as contentious as it could be at times, and you would read or hear about that, the men, and it was the men from a different era, men born in the 20s or 30s, 40s, who were absolutely following the rules and allowing me to do my job, and other women as well, as of course more and more women were coming into covering the NFL. It's pretty cool. It's pretty neat. And I always, whenever I see Joe Gibbs, I always thank him. Whenever I would talk to Don Shula, I'd thank him every time for doing something that so many others didn't do, but more and more did. And even today, there's college coaches out there who are denying women or denying anyone into locker rooms or being jerks towards the reporters or the student journalists, right? Which is really tough because we want them to have a good experience and stay journalists with the internet and social media being so difficult to navigate for those young journalists and for you guys too. Anyway, those coaches, think of those great names from the past, from a different era, who were so open-minded. So anyway, I was very fortunate to have so many positive things happening for me in the midst of what you would think would be a tough landscape for a woman in sports media. And again, I just was so launched into the career of my dreams that nothing, one guy in the corner saying, oh, you got your job because you're a woman. So what? He's complaining, and friends told me that. I just ignore him. Who cares? He's not my boss. He has nothing to do with my life, which is one big thought I would give you, is that there will always be negativity. Someone will absolutely always be jealous. They don't like you. They don't like you because of your skin color, because of your gender, because of where you're from, because of what you write. It as quickly as you can get that out of your head, and Kevin, you've dealt with this we all have, just get it out of your head and move on with your beautiful life and your beautiful career. But it can be hard, and it's harder every day because of Twitter, X, all the other nonsense that's out there, and the idiots that can attach themselves to you. I would get letters at the Washington Post. Mike Wilbon, you guys have probably heard of Wilbon. We met first day freshman year. We're like brother and sister. So we're sitting next to each other at the Post all those years. I'd get anti-women, go back to the kitchen where you belong letters. And he would, of course, get anti-African-American racist letters. And those were letters, often written in crayon, by the way. And it tells you everything you need to know. And we would give them to our sports editor, George Solomon, who might pass them up all the way to Ben Bradley. Ben Bradley was my editor. How fortunate and what a dream. Felt like I was walking into the pages of a journalism textbook with Katharine Graham and the Graham family, Ben Bradley, etc. And George would take care of them. And that's how we dealt with the hatred back then. Now, again, as I mentioned a few moments ago, those people, they don't write letters. They attach themselves to you on Twitter, X, whatever, and just barrage you. And that's really troublesome. And I'm happy to be, if I can be of any help to any of you, because I get a lot of it. You can Google me, put me in Penn State or me and Jerry Sandusky, or the Penn State people still hate me for my coverage of that, or whatever, into a search, and you'll have steam coming out of your computer. For me, bring it on. I don't care. It's but at this stage of my career. But for your career, it can be, when it hits you the first time. I'm sure you felt this way, Kevin. It's like, whoa. And that, as I said, they attach themselves to you now. It's a very different, much more hateful world. So I'm happy to discuss that further, and you guys can find me easily. My website is just my name. I get emails there. You can hit contact, and I get that within a few minutes. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I think it's probably better if we go to questions. And I will say this, I apologize in advance. I have a CNN hit at 10:40. I said, could we do any time after 10:40? Well, they picked 10:40. I'm going to be doing it up here. I work for them, so of course it's on college sports. So I'm going to be dashing out right about 9:25, 9:30.
10:25.
I'm sorry, 10:25, 10:30. Sorry about that. I'm working. I'm working ahead. And but I will be able to come back down after I do that hit. So, and no complaints. I love doing the hits. It's just the timing was terrible, and I apologize to Kevin and all of you for racing out. But I will be able to come back if you do want to talk. So, with that, why don't we open it up for questions? And yeah.
Thank you.
It should be on. There you go.
Christine, thank you so much for speaking with us. It's a pleasure to hear you speak again. I think the first time I heard you speak was in 2017 at the Povich Center with Wilbon, Chuck Costas.
Kornheiser.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a bunch of characters.
Yeah.
And Bob said, Bob talked about football destroying people's brains, and that talk about courage. That was the end of him for NBC, unfortunately, for Bob. Although he's great, doing great and wonderful.
Just broke some news there. But in 2019, I think it was the first time I brushed elbows with you when the Nationals went to the World Series.
Right. Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, two quick questions. So it's 50 years since, more than 50 years since Title IX, NIL deals in college sports. The White House a few weeks ago had an NIL event, I believe, and there were no women athletes there. You talk about Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark, they've done. Why do you think they chose not to include any women there? first question. And second question is probably a little bit closer to home. Northwestern student journalism broke
Yeah.
the story about Pat Fitzgerald and this kind of locker room behavior at Northwestern. And what did you make about that?
Sure, sure. Yes, well, in fact, the NIL issue, thanks out there for your questions. The NIL issue is what I'm going to be doing at 10:40, so that you're now allowing me to prep for my live hit. Thank you very much. And I work for ABC as well. I've got contracts with it, so it's a competitor, but not really, right? Anyway, yeah, you have to have women. What was the White House thinking? I mean, I didn't write about it or talk about it, but that's just it's 2023, and this White House of all, with Kamala Harris as the vice president. I mean, how can you not? And with, as you mentioned, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. I mean, they are the biggest names in college basketball right now, men's or women's. There's more people talking about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese in LSU and what's going on, Kim Mulkey, the coach. There's more people talking about that than any particular name in men's basketball, partially because the men's basketball names, as you know, change so quickly, off with the one and done, where the women stay. And of course, you've got this incredible storyline, as you guys know. Stories are, the known quantity, and it comes back another year. You just got more knowledge, more information. It's more interesting. The readers or the viewers know more about it already. So there's a base of interest there to begin with. I have no idea. And it's crazy. So that's just a huge swing and a miss. Just an awful decision by the White House, by Joe Biden's White House and Kamala Harris's White House. Just an absolute, I don't know what in the world they were thinking. And, obviously, I'd be very willing to criticize them even more. But it's just, you just can't do that. And what a message that sends to the 12-year-old girl, right? Yeah, that's horrible. That's complete opposite of what they normally are doing. So I have no idea who made that decision, but they really blew it. And then the Northwestern situation. Well, I'm in an absolutely weird situation in that particular circumstance because I'm on the board of trustees at Northwestern University. Now, it is a 70-person, 70 board. I was asked in 2008 to join. I really decided, it was debating whether or not to join. I knew that as a woman, as a Medill person, a journalist, and younger than the average, the older male white trustees, that I thought about it for a while, and I thought, I can avoid any issues as a columnist for USA Today on Northwestern sports. First of all, there are very few Northwestern sports stories that rise to national attention, as any of you know who follow Northwestern sports. And I'm saying that because over the years, Northwestern hasn't won a whole lot, and that would be easy to avoid. And I don't write columns on every subject, right? There's other people who write columns. So if there were something, so these were the conversations I had in 2008 when I decided to serve my university by being a voice for women athletes, and especially for journalists, because there are very few Medill alums on the board of trustees, which is, as I said, 70. It's not a 12-person board. It's a huge board. And so with that in mind, I said yes. And it's an honor to, again, serve my university. And, when you get into your 50s, you decide to do things that you wouldn't do in your 20s, right? I do a lot of speaking, and I'm very aware of who I'm taking money from. I would never take money from anyone I cover. Speakers Bureau, handles those things. But you do live life, and stuff happens, right? And I'm bringing this up because this may well be part of your lives as well, in your calculations moving forward. I would have been a black and white, right and wrong. You can't do that. You can't join. You can't be on a board, right? All through my 20s and 30s and in my 40s. I would have, absolutely, because we're journalists, right? And we're separate. We're throwing hand grenades into the room. We're not in the room. And then I joined the board of trustees. And that was fine. It worked out okay. There was the unionization issue. I steered clear of that. When I did one NPR interview on that, every single time we came from commercial break, Diane Rehm show, I made the point. I said, please say I'm on the board of trustees. Well, they didn't. So every answer I said, I want to make it clear I am on the Northwestern Board of Trustees. I'm now speaking as a sports journalist. Obviously, I had no role in that decision because it shocked me like anyone else that the players were trying to unionize. Same here. I had no idea what was going on. About 4 or 5 people are really the top people running the university. I'm not one of those people, obviously, and no idea. I knew there was a public hazing investigation. At that point, when it became known that it was what happened, I remember I told my sports editor, and she asked me to please recuse myself. That was easy. When CNN asked me to be on, I told them, again, no secret. I think it's on my Wikipedia page. I mean, which is not anything I've done, but others have. And so absolutely never, ever keep a secret, right, about what you're doing. It's always disclose, disclose, disclose. And so I just steered clear of it. So I will give you my personal feelings, but again, they're not public feelings because of being recusing myself because of that role. And I could quit the board. So far, we decided I would not do that, in part because that would have been a huge news, or potentially huge news story, that I didn't want to create news in the midst of all this other news. And I know this is way more than you asked, but it is, I'm telling you, because life sometimes gets complicated, even for those of us who are the most like by-the-book journalists you could ever be, which I felt like I've been. And so it's horrible, it's awful. I mean, Pat Fitzgerald was fired. He should have been fired immediately. It was another, 2-3 days, but he was fired. And I've known Pat forever, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked by what was going on. This was more interesting, I guess, in my case, and more difficult to recuse myself, because over the last 10 years, I've probably written and talked more about the sexual abuse of athletes and the abuse of athletes than any other subject that I have covered, probably even more than Tiger Woods. And that is, or Serena Williams, which would be other huge ones in my career over the last 10 years. And that is, of course, USA Gymnastics, the horrors of Larry Nassar, the worst sex abuse scandal in sports history, and the worst Olympic scandal, period. Just, 600, 700 women abused by Larry Nassar. Just awful. Michigan State as well as the USA Gymnastics. As I mentioned earlier, Penn State and Jerry Sandusky. I broke some stories. I wrote columns. Whatever. I'm still, as I said, despised in State College, but for that, good. That's exactly why I want to be despised. Ohio State and Jim Jordan. I've written several columns on that. Michigan and Bo Schembechler and their doctor. And now Northwestern, and I really can't speak to it. And that was hard. That was really hard. But it was just horrible. It is sexual abuse when you have got naked offensive linemen, I guess for most of the guys, players, all soaked up, blocking the shower. Do you guys know what happened? Yeah. And making the younger players come through, work their way through those bodies. Sexual assault. It's horrible. And the fact that it was at my beloved alma mater just made me sick. So, yeah, it's terrible. And a lot of those players are still playing. A lot were gone, but a lot are playing. And the assistant coaches who knew about it, well, I think they're still coaching. New head coach, so that's good news. I mean, that's very good news. So I've not watched a minute of Northwestern football this year, which is the first time ever for that. Yeah. Will I ever watch again? Yes, probably. No, because again, if I'm true to myself as a journalist and what I've covered with all this sexual abuse, the fact that there are still, as I understand it, there are still players who would have participated in that, playing on that team. And of course, here's the flip side, because some of you obviously would say, well, why didn't they just shut down football? Well, the millions and millions and millions of dollars, TV dollars. It would be a brutal decision for any university, even one so academically oriented as Northwestern, to give up that money. So it would be a dramatic decision to just, not play football for a year. And that I understand that would have been a decision that would have been impossible. So then can you fire all the assistant coaches? So practical decision-making entered the picture. But for me as a journalist, it's very easy just to avoid it. But field hockey, number 2 in the country, I spoke to the team. We talked about all these issues, our women athletes. I'm very involved with many other teams to this day, and very proud of that. And, just helping, talking, advising, mentoring on issues. Some want to be journalists, of course, things like that. Very long answer, sorry, but I thought it's important because maybe that will help you guys someday when you go, hey, oh my gosh, I'm doing something for my university or whatever. And you can say, well, back in 2023, Christine Brennan told me how it could turn out. So anyway.
First in Europe.
Yeah, no, thank you. We really appreciate that. So my question's a little bit different. So ironically, one of my good friends from my first TV market is a sports anchor. So we always often talk about, man, we're the two women in a room. I'm in a city council meeting. She's in the football, locker room. We're all trying to get our question in. And when we were younger, we always talked about, well, I'm petrified. How do I have the best question? Because I don't want to sound dumb. And granted, you're obviously, we're capable. We've studied. We've done the work. But it can still be sometimes intimidating. What is your thought process? How do you formulate, your questions when you're in the locker room? Because obviously, I think for a lot of us, even though we're not in a locker room, we're in a crowded press gaggle, similar concept. And I know you want to have an insightful, good question, but also one that, sometimes we can break news. So how do you do that? How do you formulate your questions to do this?
Yeah, I try not to overthink it, and it's easy to overthink. And I think this can apply to anyone in a pressure situation, right? The president, the vice president, a leader in the Senate, anyone, right? We're throwing in gender and being standing out in the crowd for that reason, but there's other reasons. If you're a youngster, right? If you're younger than everyone else, you're standing out in the crowd, right? So I think your question is a really good one. It can pertain to everybody. And those moments when you can really feel your heart coming through your chest, right? I still have those moments every now and then. I might have it at 10:40 today. But the best, number one is try to, if you can, I mean, it's not going to sound like I'm a yoga teacher, but, a deep breath or two, something to just go, I got this, right? I'm prepared. I belong here. I'm well educated. I'm starting in my career, kind of, just like a little confidence boost. Not that you're going to be telling yourself that as some kind of mantra, but just to, like, I'll sit there, whether I'm doing a Cisco from home, my home office up, in Northwest DC, or even now, I'm sure, just a couple deep breaths. You can kind of clear up your mind a little bit as far as questions. The thing I'm most interested in, like if something pops into my head, I don't want to overthink it. Like, that's the question then. If I've certainly written down questions. I'll give you an example in a minute. But if it's just in your head, if it's like then that's the logical thing. If you're live on TV, there's someone in their kitchen going, yeah, that's what I was wondering, right? You're trained, your feet are on the ground, you've got common sense. My late father used to say there's nothing common about common sense, but you've got it. So sometimes the simplest thing we can overthink, I've overthought many things in my career, to bring it back down to like, what do I want to ask Mitch McConnell? What do I want to ask Joe Biden if I get a chance to shout out a question? Now, again, that's pressure, right? That's probably more pressure than me talking to a football coach. Someone, but that's certainly part of it. I have written down, as I said, I've written down questions. I don't do that very often, but I still do it. And when I've done it, it's like with Tiger Woods, with those major press conferences at the Masters. After he torched his entire family life with the run-in with the fire hydrant, just completely ruined, lost all his sponsors. Totally self-induced, in November of 2009, the 2010 Masters. Now you got Tiger. And there he is. And this was a press conference unlike any other. And I'm in there. And I figured they'd call on me because I'm one of the very few women, if not a couple women out there. And obviously from a bigger newspaper, et cetera. And people were asking about the mistresses and all that. And I thought, no, that's such a stereotypical question. Plus, in the last year, he had been linked to a guy named Dr. Anthony Galea, whose assistant was arrested crossing the border from Canada to the US with illegal performance-enhancing drugs. So of all the doctors on earth, why was Tiger getting treatment from Dr. Galea, whose assistant was arrested for obviously having illegal substances, in other words, performance steroids, basically? And that was the question I asked. And he, said my name and answered something and then didn't really answer it. And then the New York Times writer, Larry Dorman, who I used to work with at the Miami Herald, that's another thing people used to work with. Your guys are pals forever. Larry, because they really didn't want any follow-ups. And I also didn't want to am I going to be the total jerk, which is yelling further? You really do make those decisions sometimes, because again, being basically the only woman or maybe one or two other in the room, it's like, oh man. And it's golf, where all the guys are basically golf bros who are just in the tank for Tiger. So I become Walter Cronkite when I ask a simple question. awful. It's fun because it's like there for the taking, but there's no journalism breaking out in that press tent. And that's appalling, frankly. And it's one of the reasons why golf has been so bad on minorities, so bad on women, because no one's been asking them tough questions, and then they've just been able to skate. And then someone does ask tough questions, and you're like an awful human being, right? So then Larry Dorman actually followed up with that. Well, what Britt said, I want to just follow up. And actually that was perfect because of the dynamics, especially in 2010, male, female, whatever. So it is great if there is someone that can follow up. I'm not saying you need help, not at all. I did not need help. I didn't expect Larry to do that. But it was wonderful because what it did was it kind of said to Tiger, this is serious. She asked it, I'm following up. And it was USA Today and New York Times. It's kind of cool. Totally unplanned. Those moments can happen. I remember one where Trump was refusing to answer, being a total jerk in a press conference. And was he berating Caitlin? Or no, Jim Acosta. Yeah. And yeah, I was just on CNN with Jim last night on the college football stuff. Anyway, great guy, obviously. And Caitlin, of course, I know you're going to love Caitlin, the best. And someone else, who was it? Do you guys remember? Someone got the mic. Give it to the next question, Trump screaming. And then did he ask he asked the same question?
Right.
Yeah. Do that. Everyone do that. Do that for everybody else and it's going to be harder. Because if Trump wins again, oh my God. It's we are in uncharted territory, and journalists really have to be great journalists and also stick together and follow up, even though we're all competitive too, right? It's like, okay, I got the mic, I want to ask my question. That was a very memorable moment. So anyway, my long windy answer, sorry, but I hopefully get some nuggets from this. But I think bottom line is you're there, you know what you're doing, you're smarter than anyone else on the planet to be there, right? I mean, we could drag someone out of a den watching in St. Louis. They're not going to be smarter than you. So know that, even though it can be hard sometimes, and all of us, we all have insecurities, we all have fears, we all can be mush inside. I've certainly had those moments in the last month or two. I can't, people would go, you at this point in your career? Absolutely, sure. Or I look at a blank screen trying to, how many times have you all done that? What's my lead? Move things around, delete, start over. How many columns have I written? 10,000? I don't know. And I'm still looking at a blank screen. It happens. So accept it, deal, and know it's coming, and also know that you're strong, you've got this, and you've got the best question in your mind. And if you need to, write it down, or write down a couple, because there's no shame at all in looking down and looking back up. Did I kind of answer the question? Okay. But shoot me an email at my website, because if there's more stuff down the road, any of you, happy to help anyway.
Hi, I just want to ask you more about the state of sports journalism in general, and just because I think it's the most clearly impacted by the internet and technology and all this fast-paced stuff. And what are your thoughts on, number one, the Sports Illustrated story about their use of AI, and then, the New York Times getting rid of the sports section and having the Athletic, and like how, the Times journalists are having a bit of an issue in how the Athletic writes their stuff and, does the reporting. Because, even thinking at the Post, like, we have a lot of talented reporters there, but the sports section feels like it's shrinking and shrinking every time. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
it is. Great points and truly troublesome. The AI thing is just awful that they were doing that. And of course, as we all know, with AI and what is it called, deep fakes or whatever, deep state, whatever it is. You guys know what I'm talking about. All this is going to happen, right? And we know, like the presidential election, there's going to be something that goes out there that Biden did this, and you're going to be like, oh my God, because it wasn't him, right? So we know this is coming, and sports is giving us a window into that, and it's just horrible. And but this is what happens when you have, I guess, business people making the decisions. You don't have journalists. The journalism has been weakened, or they're not listening. Let's take for granted that the editor is a really strong, good journalist who fought like crazy. I don't know all the details. I've read the initial story. I haven't followed up on that to see what else happened. But it's you've got to fight like heck for what's right in journalism, and we all do. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I'm on a call, a USA Today call, where our policy is men's basketball and women's basketball, right? I mean, we should all be doing that. It used to be, and it still is in many places, basketball and then women's basketball. That's wrong, right? It means like there's a real one, basketball, that's men. And then, let's tap the little Yeah, we'll call you women's basketball. And the word lady, don't even get me started on that. It's the most ridiculous thing ever, unless we're calling the team gentlemen, whatever. And we're not. So, but so I'll speak up. I'll say, are we talking men's or women's basketball? Of course, I know they mean, but it's just absolute blatant sexism. So I urge you guys to speak up in meetings, to talk about these things. I'm going to guess that someone didn't speak up loud enough in that Sports Illustrated AI thing, although again, I do not know. We have to fight super hard for this. And you're here, you know that. I'm telling you stuff you already know. But if it can enhance or just, encourage you to be forceful on that. And it's going to get harder, not easier, right? With this fractured world. I mean, Kevin, you and I growing up, 3 channels, everyone listened to Walter Cronkite or John Chancellor, or Frank Reynolds, Howard K. Smith, whatever. And that was facts were facts, and that was the thing. And we had a communal experience. And now, of course, it's the complete opposite. So all this stuff is probably going to just keep going and going. That was AI. Oh, and then The Athletic. That was heartbreaking. There's a lot of good friends at the New York Times were moved out of sports, even though they're still maybe writing sports, but they're writing it about business, and they'll still go to the Olympics, but they're going to be, yeah. But, at the end of the day, we are a capitalist society, and we are, we're business people, and you're getting paychecks, right? We're capitalists, or if you don't think of yourself as a capitalist, we're part of this society or this country that has got these, this is the way business works. And when the New York Times bought The Athletic, you had to go in your brain like, they're going to do something with this. You don't, as a company, you don't just buy something and then financially, especially at tough times in our business, and then just go, okay, well, we'll just keep that, but we'll also keep all these staffers. Of course, I wish they kept all the staffers and didn't have The Athletic. Although there's some wonderful people at The Athletic as well. And I have hopes that highlighting and showcasing those fine journalists will be, more the norm. But it's, I think we all as journalists need to come to grips with the business side. I've never thought about one newspaper ever being bought, literally ever. I've never, when I write something, how they always say, like a critic will say to you, oh, well, you headline, you just want to sell newspapers, or that way you wrote. I've never thought once in a 42-year career about selling a newspaper, ever. It's the quality. It's the headline is based on the news. I don't write the headlines, but the lead is not based on being salacious and selling papers. I'm going to guess each and every one of you feels the same way. You've never thought about selling papers. You are, or new, a network or people watching on TV, whatever it is that we're doing. But we've all seen ads, and we know that ads exist for one reason. If there's no ads, there's no us, right? Unless it's a ProPublica, unless it's a, and there hopefully will be many more of those things. So this is a delicate dance that is going to continue for the rest of my career, Kevin's career, and the rest of your careers. And it's how we fight for journalism within that world, right? And obviously, I know many people at the New York Times that fought super hard to not have that happen, and were absolutely horrified and went up there to have like the funeral and the lunch and the wake and the Irish wake and everything that they did. And let's just hope that great journalism keeps coming out of that. But it is sad for sure. It is. We'll see more. I'm afraid. I'm a very optimistic person, very positive. I think we're going to see more of this, and it's the downsizing is tough. And people then going to websites, like if you love Maryland women's basketball, you don't have to read the Post. I hope you do, right? Or the Baltimore Sun or whatever. But, or watch on local TV. You can go to probably 100 different websites, which is great on one level because there wasn't coverage of women's sports. Now fans can find it so many other places. But of course, many of that, we don't know if that's someone in their basement who doesn't know anything about journalism. Or maybe it is a former journalist. Hopefully people can have the literacy that we have to know the difference. Very hard. That needs to happen in schools as well. Journalism literacy, which I know is starting to happen in some places. But there's that. But, the fact is it's often the PR, the sports information director, the PR people writing it. That said, you're getting some information, but it's being written by someone in-house. So it's not journalism the way we expect it to be.
You go.
Hi, if I could be greedy, I really just wanted 2 questions.
Of course.
One is, I was wondering if you could kind of give your assessment on where the IOC and Olympic movement is now, and maybe FIFA, because I have not covered it since I was 19, and frankly, it does not seem to have changed. But I'm no Jens Weinreich, so I don't follow it. And then my second question. I now work at The Guardian. Sean Ingle used to be my competitor, but is now my colleague, and we're very close. And he says hi and said, you need to get Christine to talk about your Tanya story. So.
Oh, tell him I. That's great. It's wonderful. And by the way, I didn't mean to look at my phone, except I just wanted to make sure that I'm still on with CNN. That's
We've got 3 minutes.
Yeah. So yeah. Again, sorry, this was not how I planned this day at all. But welcome to your future world, right? You're doing a quick hit, come back, whatever. So the IOC and it's the IOC. To me, the where we saw the IOC in all its glory and all of its faults, mostly emphasis on the latter, was the Peng Shuai situation at the Beijing Olympics. I was in Beijing, I was in Tokyo, and those were actually 2 of my favorite Olympics because of the news value. Couldn't go anywhere, COVID, any moment, positive test, and you're going into quarantine. Yeah, I circumvented it? I don't think I did. I'm pretty sure I didn't circumvent anything. There was no circumventing the Chinese government. I'm not sure what he's talking about, but that's okay. Maybe he circumvented it. Yeah, no, seriously, there was, I love him. There was absolutely no circumventing these rules. And the time you had to get this test 96 hours, not 95 hours before, but 96 hours from when you land in Tokyo. Oh, try that with math and time. It was as stressful as anything I have done. But anyway, Peng Shuai. So you guys remember that story, the tennis player who's missing, lots of concern, the WTA, Women's Tennis Association, really standing out among all by pulling all of its events out of China. Look at the compare and contrast with Live Golf and the PGA Tour. Awful, disgusting, the worst. And here's the WTA. Now they're back in China, but at least they took that stand for a couple of years. And the IOC, as you may recall, then put out some video. Oh, we talked to her and everything's fine. And I've talked to several IOC members I've known forever saying that is just the most embarrassing thing you've ever done, and wrote it and talked about it and asked questions. Peng Shuai was the world's biggest Me Too story, right? At that point, worldwide, you've got the Olympics going to Beijing, you've got this woman in China missing, and she'd put online the fact that she had been sexually abused, sexually assaulted, harassed, I forget the exact wording now, by a top government official in China, and all of a sudden she disappears. That's Me Too times on steroids. And instead of the IOC, and I asked the IOC president, Thomas Bach, at his press conference in Beijing. Camilla Valieva was the big story, and I was able to break that story, which was one of the highlights of my career for sure. But the big thing was, asking about this, and I said it. You've got the world's biggest Me Too story, and instead of pushing and speaking out for her, you're telling us she's okay, but we're not even seeing the rest of the room, because if you're showing a video, who's in the room? Is there someone holding a gun to her head? Oh, there's my alarm. Sorry, I don't normally do that, but I wanted to make sure I remember. Got a few minutes, and so that and he answered poorly, but I'm glad I asked it. And someone came up to me, a Canadian journalist, and actually said, "Do you realize what you did by bringing that up?" And I said, "No, I just asked the question." Back to the asking a question. It's just the question. It was in my head for like a month. I just asked it. I don't think I wrote that one down. And he said, well, what you did by describing a couple sentences of what I was talking about, which I didn't mean to have a prelude, I just kind of set the stage for the issue. He said, there are 100 Chinese journalists in here who had no idea what Peng Shuai was until you just asked that question. It was like, oh my gosh. So sometimes you just stumble into stuff. I've stumbled into a lot of things over the years. So that's that. And then Tanya Nancy, I don't know if you guys saw the movie I, Tanya, but this is a story that changed my life. Suffice to say, there's never been a story quite this big. It was 1994, attack on the knee of one skater by the associates of the other. You're familiar? But news-wise, it was huge. And I was at the Washington Post. I covered it every day from Detroit in January 6, 1994, all the way to the Lillehammer Olympics in November of 94, or excuse me, not in February of 94. And it was so big, 6th highest rated show in television history when they skated, Tanya, Nancy, and the others in the short program at the Olympics in Norway. Last Match, Who Shot JR, one episode of Roots, 2 Super Bowls involving Joe Montana, Tanya Nancy, forevermore. And no one had ever done a book I'll kind of leave you with this thought, and again, I will come back if anyone wants to hang out or has a chance to. I've never skated. I put on skates and can go forward. I'm not a figure skater. I'm too tall for that. That was not one of my sports. But I'd written a book with Tracy Austin, the tennis star, and with the editor was a woman named Lisa Drew at Scribner. She brought Jackie Kennedy into the publishing world. So one of the icons, like the Babe Ruth of the publishing world. And Lisa Drew writes me a letter after Tanya Nancy. That's when I started doing a lot of TV work because everyone wanted someone who could put 2 sentences together about figure skating, and I could do that. And Tanya Nancy, it's the first big mass interest cable reality kind of story. About 4 months before O.J. Simpson and 2 dead bodies. It was a bruised knee that spurred Nancy Kerrigan on the greatest performance of her life. So you could kind of laugh about it in some ways. Anyway, Lisa Drew gets in touch and says, read you in the Post. It was A1 every day. A1, like literally the Washington Post, like two months of top of often above the fold, A1, or above the fold, certainly in sports. And Lisa said, any book ideas? And I said, well, no one's ever written a journalistic look at figure skating. And because of that ridiculous, awful, but kind of, nonsensical story and moment, I actually wrote this book called Inside Edge that became a bestseller and allowed me to get another book deal that then allowed me to leave the Post. Nothing was wrong. I just thought, wait, I can go off on my own, do books, TV, and then USA Today happened a year and a half later. And I literally changed my life and allowed me to carve out my life exactly as I want it. So I guess I will leave you guys with this thought as I dash off to do the things that I carved out my life to do. I guess I should, in some ways, regret it at this exact moment, but because I'd love to stay here longer. But that you never know in your career what the story will be that literally changes your life. Each and every one of you will have something that becomes, it could be a book, could be that huge breaking story, you name it, right? And never in my wildest dreams, when I was your age, all the way into I was 36 when that happened, 35, that I would have thought at age 35, the attack by one figure skater's ex-husband and others on the knee of another figure skater, people I would have never heard of in my 20s, would be the thing that would change my life. But it did. And so that story is waiting there for each and every one of you. It is the greatest profession on earth. It is the greatest adventure of a lifetime. And I love it more today than the day I started. And why is that? Because I've continued to change things a little, but stay in what I love and what I've loved since I was that 12-year-old girl, watching sports and typing things up and hoping to be a journalist someday. And that is the adventure of a lifetime. So with that, I'm going to go have an adventure of a lifetime. Thank you so much, you guys. Stay in touch.